friends. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for joining me in our journey to hope. It is my desire through this podcast to bring you information about how to discover, sustain, or perhaps regain hope. In this episode, I'm speaking with a new friend, Doug Fleener. I'll let him introduce himself and tell us about what he does. I met Doug through a shared podcast resource. I liked what I read about his personal growth and where to start, and that fits well with this podcast theme of hope. Hello, Doug.
Hello, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Well, again, the pleasure is mine, and thank you for your time. I tell people the most precious gift we can give someone is our time. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I want to talk about what you do in the world of helping folks discover, sustain, and regain hope. So tell us about yourself.
Well, I was talking with someone yesterday, and I jokingly said that in high school I could have maybe been voted least likely to succeed, more than likely to succeed. But I was voted wittiest of my senior class, which may have been I may have peaked at age 18. I'm not sure.
Hey, a quick question. What is your birth order? Are you oldest, youngest, in the middle?
Right. I'm the third of three. So I'm right there at the youngest of them. There was 6 years between my oldest brother and 3 years between my other brother. And
I'm sorry. Would you say that again, please?
Yeah. So I was the youngest of three.
Okay.
So I'm the youngest child. And, I grew up, and one of the love is talking with you is I grew my parents divorced at a very early age, but my grandfather was a very well-known preacher in the Midwest. And so I grew up in the church. And but, when I hit a certain age, and I'd say about 13, 14, I discovered alcohol. I discovered drugs.
Wow.
And my mother worked nights. So it was three boys. It was Animal House before there was the movie Animal House.
I can imagine. Okay.
And but one of the things, probably the easiest way to describe myself is I was a drug addict, I was an alcoholic, I was a liar, I was a cheater, I was a quitter, and I can say those things today because I'm no longer those things.
Yeah.
They no longer identify me, but. The most important part of my story is that when I was in my 20s, I dropped out of college because I was working full time, partying full time, and going to school full time. So something had to give. So yeah, unfortunately, it was school. But I got into the boat business down in Florida, and my father and I opened up a marine supply store, and it was there that I started to meet. This was in the 80s and the Miami Vice days, and I got to know a lot of drug dealers and runners, and so the thing is I ended up bankrupting a family business because of my addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was one of the things I always say about bottoms, and I think this is so important when you talk about hope is, we all hit some bottom sometime in life, and multiples. And I like to think of bottoms as kind of falling through this deep hole. And eventually you quit falling, you hit a ledge. And one of two things can go well. I mean, two things can happen. One is that that can be my final bottom for that moment and rise. Or I roll over and I go deeper into the hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I hit that ledge.
As you were saying that, I
times.
was thinking you hit that ledge and you bounce off of it and fall further. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then there's a deeper ledge and a deeper ledge. And eventually, that lowest one could be death, insanity. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can happen. Tragic accidents, you name it. But luckily, and I'd hit a number of ledges, but it wasn't enough to change my life. But this one was big because my father had figured out that I'd bankrupted a family business. And, my story has this moment where it really changed it was Super Bowl. It was a Super Bowl of 1987. And I'd had a big blowout party. And my father knew I was stealing from the business. And then the next morning, I decided, well, what any guy in his late 20s will do, I'll run away from home. And so I end up waking up in the center seat of an airplane landing in Houston from Florida. No idea how I got there. I got there in a blackout. Put my hand in my pocket. Big wad of money. Wasn't mine. It's what was left of the family business. And it was at that moment that I knew I needed to make some change, but I wasn't sure I wanted that change.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. Realizing and following through are two different things. So I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
No. So, and that's very true. And so I ended up flying back and meeting with my father. And when, I just wanted it to go away. And he insisted that I go into a 12-step program, into a recovery, at least check it out. And there was a guy there I met who, I was so overwhelmed with everything that I had screwed up in my life, and I needed to fix everything. And but this guy said something to me that really changed my life. He said, what if today you just go the day without a drink? That's all I had to, that's all he was saying. Man, that's all I had to do. And I was wanting to fix everything. I was wanting to change everything. I was full of regret. I was full of remorse. And he just said, well, what if just today, just go do your best, live without a drink for one day. And, what I've come to see is that was such an, I call them interrupters. It was such an interrupter in my life that it could change my old way of thinking, and it could start to put me on a different path. Now, you don't get all the way right down to the end of the path in the first step.
Right.
Right. But the only way you get on the path.
Well, I call it a
that
journey.
First step. Absolutely. And a journey, right, starts with a first step and then a second step. And that was, and I didn't know it for many years as I look back to how vital that moment was.
Uh-huh.
That simple question. And as a result, I learned to be able to live without a drink, live without a drug. And because I kept moving forward and trying to grow on a daily basis, a lot of good things happened to me and end up with a life that I never could have imagined.
Yeah. Wow. Man, thank you for sharing that. All of us face difficult pathways in our journey. Some, it just takes your breath away sometimes when you hear and learn things. And so thank you for sharing that. In my research, in my master's degree, my thesis was on the relationship. And the reason I asked you about birth order was about the relationship between birth order characteristics and how people prefer to learn. My master's is in adult learning. And that's why I asked you about what birth order you were. You said that you were a bit of a cut up, and that's very typical of a younger child, youngest child. You kind of discovering your way and sort of thing. Something else you talked about there made me think too. Typically, significant change where we begin to seek a way out of something is the result. One of the reasons for it is the result of what a guy named Morris Massey way back in the 70s called a significant emotional event. And sometimes we have to experience that. You described it as hitting the bottom, and I think that's very, very descriptive. But because, and I'm running my mouth, I'm sorry, the longer we wait on these things, the more likely it's going to be a negative, significant emotional event. Doesn't have to be, but it most often is. Okay.
Wow. And let me just say is,
Please.
I often, someone asked me once, said, well, didn't you see some signposts along the way? Well, yes. And, I got a DWI, and I described, I explained that away, and I lost every relationship I was ever in. And so there was plenty of signposts. I just ran them over.
Yeah.
Knocked one out of the way after another. But there are definitely signposts along the way for all of us to get to that moment.
Well, you obviously turned your life around. What are you doing now?
Today, you know what I do is I help people, and I've worked with a lot of leaders to really help them get better perspectives and better and more options, so that they can move forward with more clarity. I I'm a big believer, and part of coming out of recovery, right, is that long-term success is created by whatever I do today.
Okay.
Right? It's just whatever I do today makes it for tomorrow, and tomorrow, when I do that, it's what makes it for the next day, and
Yeah.
that's how I live my life.
Yeah. That fellow I just mentioned, Morris Massey, makes the point. What we are today is the total or the totality of all the decisions we've made in our life up to this point, good and bad.
Absolutely.
He says we are who we were when. And so that's insightful on your part as well. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, you said something else there that I have noticed so many times when we have gone through something. In my case, it was a significant health crisis of fighting through leukemia. In your case, it was coming out of that life that you had fallen into. We just can't help but want to turn around and help others out of that. We just feel compelled to do that, and that's what you've done or are doing. That's great.
Well, I'm a big believer, right? You can't keep what you don't give away.
That's right. That's an interesting way to say that. I like it. All right. Um, in your writing, and I went through your website and looked at it, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But you talk about the what if rule. I like that. Tell us what it is and how can we start using it now?
Look, the what if rule. We talk about when you get to a certain point and you look back at your life and you look at all these moments, and then when you want to start, I started to try to connect the dots of all the different things that happened in my life, big, small. And, and I mentioned it earlier about, there's these moments of interruption where I change either the old habit, I change the old way of thinking, or maybe I change the stories that I've been telling myself. Or I talk a lot about reactions. My actions don't get me near as much trouble as my reactions, right? And so what I
Yeah.
saw was that if there's just this moment where there can be this interruption to just kind of stop for a second. And so what I realized is that really three things would happen, and this is what the essence of the what if rule, it's that I can intentionally change the moment or the direction, or I call it your perspectives and your options, by doing a simple three-step of pause, question, and go.
Okay.
And the book premise is really about what if, and using what if questions to look forward or at the moment rather than looking back.
Okay.
Right? Most people talk about what if. Well, what if I hadn't studied that? What if I hadn't taken that job? What if I hadn't gotten married? And so it's all backwards. And that, and I like to think, if you keep looking backwards, you're going to run into something going forward.
Yeah.
uh, so the what if rule really is a simple three-step process of, again, pause, question, go. Now, here's the thing. I set out to write a book about the what if rule. But I'm also a big believer that there's brilliance in simplicity. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I had to take 200 pages to try to explain a simple process, that is not a process anyone's going to use.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. They won't even make it through those pages.
No. So I have one chapter called about the what if moments, one called the what if rule. But then the rest of the book is about how to apply the what if rule on a weekly basis.
Okay. I like that because it's a forward looking, as you well described it, and hope is a forward looking concept. And so you're doing that. Um, when you talked about you're going to run into something if you're looking backwards, people have said you don't drive by looking where you've been. You're looking ahead so you don't run into something. I also liked what you said, not the action, but the reaction. How many times in sports a referee will not see
Yeah,
the initial infraction, but he's sure going to see the reaction. And that's the
absolutely.
guy or the gal that gets in trouble. It's
So
like, well, wait a minute.
yeah, he did it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and in my reactions, right, it's just so much are really just the triggers that really are the ones that, somebody cuts you off in traffic and you take it as something personal,
yeah,
right? They
yeah.
don't even know
Uh-huh.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Or who cares what that person next to me is thinking? In 30 seconds, I'll never see that person again in my life. Okay. Um, there's times when we're involved in a situation, it's been my observation that when life happens, we might sit around playing the game of woe is me. And as long as we're playing woe is me, we're going to be stuck in that situation. So I like that idea of what if, and not what if this did not happen. But you're saying, what if I do this or make that change, whatever. I like that. That is
Thank
really
you.
good. So you're bringing an interesting perspective to confidence and to action because it does take a little bit of a level of confidence sometimes to take that what if action. You talk about gaining confidence from the action rather than waiting to build confidence and then act. Uh, so let's talk about that just a little bit.
Sure. One of my uh, there's different sayings you learn out there, and you go, "Gosh darn it, I wish I had thought of that." You know?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Uh, but there's a saying out there that goes, you act your way into a new way of thinking. You don't think your way into a new way of acting, right? So for me, that confidence, you could use the word courage, right? It's about moving forward knowing that you don't have to know the whole journey. You don't have to know even the end result. But, for me, confidence comes with just taking action. In coaching people, I think one of the things is I find is, and it's almost a little embarrassing, is you find that most people, they know the answer.
Mm.
They just haven't taken the action. And
Uh-huh.
whether it's fear, regret, and again, I think sometimes the stories that we've told ourselves or that others have told us, um, that quite often I'll be coaching someone and I'll say, well, I had a manager who says, I'm terrible at confrontation. I'm terrible at coaching. And I was like, oh, okay, give me an example, right? Or tell me why you say that. And it's one example of 5 years ago of something that happened and it had nothing to do really with them.
Okay.
It really had something to do with the other person,
Mm.
right? And so they get stuck in that story or in that loop.
Yeah. Something else I've read about and have some discovery in my own situation is when I step out and try something, even if it doesn't work, at least I know that doesn't work and I can try something else. That's an adult learning principle, by the way. Um,
Hmm.
Most adult learning situations are based on a need that I have to take care of right now. And so I'm going to try something. And what doesn't work, great. I leave that alone. I'm going to go in a different direction. So doing the same old thing does not necessarily work. So, okay.
Yeah, and quite often people, will say, well, well, what if I fail? Well, what if you succeed?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If you don't take action, well, that's failure right there. Okay. You also talk about the term reframing. Now, I like that. And I think I know where you're going to go with that, but I want to hear from you how you use that concept of reframing.
Well, I think one of the challenges we often have is I often compare our lives to remember the Bill Murray movie Groundhog Day.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, right? And so sometimes our lives can be a little Groundhog Day, right? I got to get the kids up to
Yeah.
school, or the grandkids got to pick them up, right? And it becomes such a routine. And
Mm,
and and so I think that we get into these patterns of seeing things,
mhm.
and
Sure.
really what this whole what if approach is it's just trying to interrupt you out of that, and to just start to see this that there is always a different perspective and more options than you first see.
Okay.
And but you have to kind of again stop that automatic response, that normal, the normal thing that you've done, and and to be able to see that you can't. It's a very learned behavior
Okay.
to be able to reframe and see things differently. But the thing with reframing and I don't, I make sure that people know that this book isn't just about reframing or my approach is because right, reframing without action changes nothing,
Well, right.
right?
Yeah.
As
Uh-huh.
simple as it sounds, but
Yeah.
it's,
I see that. Okay. Well, it seems to me that reframing should have some kind of direction. It's not just thinking about something as you just well described. You're talking about gaining confidence from action rather than waiting to build confidence. So again, it's the idea of reframing effort rather than just reframing for the sake of reframing. There's some effort that has to be, you got to take that step.
yeah. And as I talk about in the what if rule is that third step, right? Is just go. It's just about moving forward.
Yeah.
I was one time doing a little consulting work, and I was on location at a place, and it was these two sisters who owned it, and their business was really struggling. And I'd walk through, and I was like, well, what about this? And it'd be, well, we thought about that. Well, we weren't sure that was going to work. And after about 12, they had again all this information, but they hadn't done the one thing. They just hadn't done go. And so, I think what people miss is that each day, if you can look at something just a little bit differently and try something new, learn something new, do something new.
Yeah. Okay. A question came to mind. You mentioned about 12 step or, processes that help people out of maybe addiction of some kind or whatever. But should we share our desire to reframe or what we're going to reframe? Should we share that with someone if for no other reason than to have an accountability partner? It seems to me that would be a valuable resource.
Absolutely. And I think everyone needs that person that they can connect with on a deep and honest. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the things I really learned in recovery, right, is that um, I was a really good liar, and
Mm.
unfortunately, most of those lies were to myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so,
You're not the
so
first person I've heard say that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's very true.
yeah, and so so I think having that person. I have a friend of mine, Steve, who we text, we talk, but it's quite often, we'll ask each other, all right, what are you not telling me?
Okay. I like
Because,
that.
right, sometimes, right, it's like that, well, here's what I'm doing. And I'm just, I've been,
Yeah.
and to just kind of come out with that. But, I think, again, I think that, really, is there anything more important to our growth, change and growth than really human connection
Yeah.
and doing something in a we versus an I?
Uh-huh. You have put this several times from your own reference point in dealing with addictions, but addictions can take any form, as we well know. So it's not just a substance abuse. It may be a whole range of issues and not just addiction. It might be just a catastrophic lifestyle that people have and they recognize they need to change. I like that. So what are you not telling me? Okay. I like to
Yeah.
tell people in the communication process as you're listening to somebody, there's almost always a question behind the question. So
Mm.
what's the real question that you're trying to get at? You're saying, you're not telling me. What's the real issue here of why not or what can I do? That sort of thing. Okay,
And one of the things
great.
is that, and this started out of addiction, but it ended up, the goal was, right, is each day to move a little bit further away from that person that I was.
Mm,
And
okay.
right, and it doesn't take a hitting a bottom, right? But it could be someone who's maybe just a little short with their kids,
Mm,
or someone who is stressed. It doesn't have to be something big, but it's about, can you change and grow on a daily basis? And one of the simpler ways I look at my life is I like to think I'm never sitting still. I'm either moving towards or away from the person I want to be. And so at any moment, am I moving towards it or away from it? Or you could say the same with happiness and other.
no. Again, as you were talking about that, the thought that came into mind is somebody may be, I'm trapped in a job, a career I don't like any longer, whatever. And so I'm looking for a way out of that. So this also has applications into that element of life, our job situation. Any way to look at that. I hesitate to use the idea that it also helps in a marriage relationship, but I think it does.
Mm.
If I'm in a marriage, I'm not saying get out of that marriage. I'm against that. I'm saying improve that marriage uh, rather than get out of it. There's if something's not going right, well, what can I do? What if? Back to your statement there. So
There- There's
I
a
like the
there's a
application of that.
and talking about marriage. There's a story. There's one of the stories in the book that I really like is there was a woman who. In her marriage, one of the things that just drove her absolutely nuts is that her husband wouldn't close kitchen cabinets doors. He'd go in, get a plate, and leave the cabinet open. And
Wow.
so and she would just get annoyed and go over and just kind of, slam it shut,
Slam it.
right? And it took on a much bigger life than it needed to have. But, but it was really getting in the way of, of,
Right.
of their
And I
relationship.
chuckle about it, but that was serious. That was an element. That was an interference. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, right. You're right. And so it made her think. And so one of the things that she did that I just love is, well, what if I change how I think about that when I see an open cabinet? And
Mm.
so what she changed is that every time she would close the cabinet, she would use it as a moment to think of something that she really likes and appreciates about her husband.
Reframed. There you go. I
Right. And
like it.
so instead of getting mad about an open door, she shows more gratitude and appreciation for her husband.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So that open cabinet door became a reminder of how much I love that old guy.
Yeah, exactly. Even though his memory of closing it is not so great.
So she goes in and says, "Thank you for leaving the cabinet door open."
Yeah. Or maybe he starts leaving it open more often to get more compliments.
That's right. Reinforcing. But I don't think that was the intent, but still, that's
But
great. I like
but
it.
it is a really great example of how we have the power to change our perspective because it's our perspective, right?
Yeah.
So she changed it and it became something that was no longer in the way in their relationship.
Yeah. That's great. Okay. Well, let me shift gears a little bit here. I've enjoyed what you said very much. Good insights. Um, Again, my podcast is about helping people discover, sustain, or regain hope, or rediscover hope, maybe. And life has a way of challenging us, especially
Mm.
our hope in things. And so, what is your understanding of the concept of hope?
Boy, that question just really took me back to a point where I was truly hopeless.
Um,
And one of the things that really helped me move from hopeless to start to making the change and growth necessary is that I could see others who have come on that same journey and was able to move past where I was at. And so, for someone, I think, especially like listening to this podcast, that you give them that no matter where someone is at, to me, that hope is about that, I guess the only thing that is truly finite is death.
Mm. Yeah.
Everything, right? Everything else has the power to change.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, I think that hope starts with just knowing that, I have a kind of a little simple thing of just saying is you can't change what you don't own.
Okay.
You can't change what you don't own. And so let's go to that example of feeling hopeless in a job, right? You're not stuck. You're just there in the moment.
Yeah. Okay.
And right, but you have to own, the man is not holding you down, right? The world is
right. You're not a slave. You're not in servitude. You can bring about change. Okay.
right. But it has to start where? It has to start with you.
Yeah.
But it has to start. But I think the problem is, right, is we feel stuck and we don't change and we don't move because the idea of this whole long out far thing of getting a new job and maybe, what am I going to do financially, it becomes overwhelming
Uh-huh.
versus just asking, well, what if I just did one thing this week to update my resume or, or talk to 5 different people about what they do for a living. To me, that hope is about you get hope, I think, again, and earlier is I think you get hope from action.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I tell people or I teach people about hope. What I had hoped for may not be possible. It will certainly be different than I had initially envisioned it. And so hope is still there. It just may be in a different way than you had originally thought it would be. An example might be somebody who's incarcerated and maybe for a long sentence, maybe even a life sentence. And they say, well, it's hopeless that I'll ever be out and have a normal life. Okay. But you can have hope in a different way in whatever situation you're in. Just look for it with a different perspective in mind. So, yeah, hitting bottom can be very challenging in and of itself. It doesn't mean a failure if you're using it as, okay, this is now my foundation, and I'm going to build back from it.
And I think, and I believe hope also does come from, and same with change, is that if I can't always help myself at that moment, but if I get out of myself and help someone else, it just always returns twofold.
I say that all the time, my friend. You feel in a hopeless situation, look outside of yourself, start helping somebody else, and hope will begin. It's amazing. It is amazing. I see it all the time. Okay.
So true.
You've got a book coming out. Now, when I first looked at it, it's coming out in January. Is that still on track?
Yep, January 6th.
Okay.
And good. It's called, it's called Start with What If? Weekly Questions to Spark Immediate Change and Growth. And
okay, Start with What If. I love it. Good title. And it's available on Amazon.
It will be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, and working to get it into a number of libraries because I believe there's a lot there that can help people.
Yeah. Okay. And they can also find it on your website.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, I went, if you go to the website, startwithwhatif.com, and what I've done there is to put together a pretty substantial 44-page excerpt.
Okay.
And so, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't going to write a whole book about a really simple concept and also I believe that action was so important. So the first 5 chapters are really the essence and the foundation of the start with what if approach, with the what if approach. And so I give those chapters away so you can take it and start applying it. And then I show you some of the examples of the different 52 questions you can start each week to start to change and they may not apply to you and they may actually big change for you.
Well, somebody will find something in there to start building and then go and look at others. So yeah.
Absolutely, and that excerpt is free. So if they'll just go and they can download it, Kindle, PDF, all different
Okay.
versions.
Okay, very good. I am going to put that information in the show notes and encourage people. Also, I have a podcast, excuse me, a web page called Our Journey to Hope, and I'll put that information on there as well as a resource. I think that's good stuff. Doug, I'm glad you agreed to be on my podcast.
Well, I appreciate you asking me. It's I think to be able to share hope is a very powerful thing, and
Yeah.
I
Well, I
appreciate you doing
reserve the
that for
right to
people.
have you back on at a later date. I'd like to talk to you some more about this and see how things are going. I think you've got some good things to offer folks. Okay.
Well,
Anything
thank you,
else you
Dave.
want to add before we wrap up? I don't mean to rush you.
No, I don't. I don't feel rushed at all. Just I would just say is that take one action today.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, I'll wrap up then. Friends, thank you for joining Doug and I as together we journey to hope. I trust in some small way we have encouraged you to discover, sustain, or regain hope through this effort. I invite you to contact me if you have any questions or comments, or if you wish to share with me something you've experienced in your journey to hope. My email is info@ourjourneytohope.com. That's info@ourjourneytohope.com. And please share this podcast with someone whose hope is being challenged. I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Again, I'm Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for listening. And until our next episode, remember, we give all glory to God our Father.